Now, the area that's really interesting me in economics at the moment throws up a few of its own examples of this principle. And the area that is really interesting, and you might be a little bit aware of some of it, is the sort of area of behavioural economics, psychonomics. It's the sort of intersection of psychology and economics. And it seems to just have quite a lot of explanatory power because human factors seem to play quite a big role in things that happen in the world. And sometimes the rather simplistic models of the economists just don't capture everything that is going on, and you need to have a little bit of psychology in there to explain things. And it's thrown up some, I think, quite interesting examples of the Atkins-Diet principle. One is quite an interesting one, an Israeli daycare centre, which was fed up with parents picking up their children late, because of course they've got to look after the children until the later parents arrive to pick them up. So it said, okay, we're going to start charging parents who leave the children late. We've got to stop this problem. We're going to charge people if they leave their kids, beyond the 3 p.m., 4 p.m. Allotted time. But what happened when they did that? Of course, parents thought, oh, we're allowed to leave our kids late now, and we just have to pay a little bit extra. That's absolutely fine. So suddenly, of course, parents were all just leaving their children late. And the interesting thing was they never could get it back. I mean, having done that, and they said, look, okay, no, we're not going to charge you anymore. It was too late. They've got the parents in the mindset of thinking, you don't owe a social obligation to us to pick up your child on time, which is something that really disciplines a decent parent. As soon as it just became a commercial transaction, everyone said, okay, we'll just optimise the commercial transaction, and it was impossible to get the parents to think of it as a social obligation after that. So that's an interesting one. And there's another one which I quote quite frequently at people. In fact, I think quite an important one. This is an important one for you guys, actually. And it's that if you think, particularly in difficult times like this, that the route to happiness is earning a little bit more, or buying yourself a little treat, or acquiring something that you always coveted. The evidence is actually very, very dodgy on that. I mean, really, it's absolutely hopeless. And the evidence on happiness, which economists are very interested in this sort of psychonomics area, the evidence on happiness is that the best way to make yourself happy is to give things away. It's absolutely extraordinary. It's quite the opposite of what you'd expect. But melancholy tends to make people a bit selfish and self-absorbed, and the most fascinating thing is that it's absolutely self-defeating. The way to get out of your melancholy is to hand stuff out and become completely unself-absorbed and completely giving. It's fantastically well documented this. Volunteering your time is so clearly a route to happiness that it should probably be made compulsory. I mean, it's just absolutely... Now, this science of economics and psychology and this whole area of sort of twisting things around, I think there are insights in economics as to why these things kind of work and why human factors that sometimes force us to see things in a box or see things in a particular route traps us. And you occasionally just have to ask yourself, am I breaking out of the constraints of my mindset? Am I stuck in my own mindset? Have I been sufficiently robust with myself at breaking out of that mindset? Your second compulsory reading, apart from the book Risk, is this one, Predictably Irrational, which is a fantastic book describing mostly all the funny tests they've done with students at MIT, which include the indecent ones of getting male students into sexual arousal and then giving them questionnaires and asking them to see whether the results are the same as when they're not in a state of sexual arousal. In all too much detail, I might say. It's just a fantastic compilation of the ways in which human behaviour is a funny thing. And I think it makes the point.
Who's it by?
It's by a guy called Dan Ariely. Dan Ariely, A-R-I-E-L-Y. And it makes the point that there are just a number of systematic ways in which we have evolved, because we are evolved creatures, systematic ways in which we've evolved, for one reason or another, in ways that we behave a little bit, what appears to be a little bit irrational or a little bit idiosyncratic. And I want to just give you one or two, because I think they are very interesting. They offer up some interesting insights into why we constantly need to break out of our mindset. One is emotion governs us. And emotion, in the economy at the moment, it's very obvious that emotion drives behaviour. And so sometimes you are influenced by things, not understanding that there's an emotion underlying what you're believing that is actually driving your beliefs. You think of your beliefs as being rational, based in some kind of research or science, but of course there's a lot of emotion underlying them, and there's quite a powerful case made about that. A second one is that we tend to have a lack of control. They've done these tests, I can't remember them exactly, but you offer students a Mars bar or an apple, and you say, which one would you like? And they say the Mars bar. If you say to them, I'm going to give you a Mars bar or an apple in a week's time, which one would you like? They would say the apple, you see. It's quite interesting, you know, that there's this time inconsistency. And then if you say to people in a week's time, having that you opted for the apple last week, I will swap it for a Mars bar if you would like. Of course, they will say, actually, I will take the Mars bar now. And you can do this with films, art house films versus Mrs. Doubtfire. You know, I'll see the art house film if it's next week, I'll see Mrs. Doubtfire if it's right now. I mean, this is a sort of fascinating thing. In fact, there's even a great website called stick.com with 2 Ks, stick.com, which is on the insides of behavioural economics, worked out that people can improve themselves by betting against themselves on some improvement in their behaviour. They want to diet or they want to save money, give up smoking. You just go onto stick.com, you place a bet with stick.com, committing yourself to paying them £100 or £200 if you fail, and then you've now given yourself an incentive to do something that you know that you ought to do, but that you might have weakness of the will. And this is a sort of another area in which human beings are fallible people. But the third thing, so we've had sort of emotion governs us, we have no control. The third, and by far the most important, is that we tend to see the evidence that supports the contention that we have in our mind already. And this is so totally universal, in which, and it's actually almost impossible not to do. We are so programmed as pattern seekers, as pattern spotters. You know, we evolved to think, oh, the bison come down and drink from the water at sunset. We'll come down and kill the bison at sunset. That we are always seeing patterns, creating hypotheses, and then thinking they're true because we see evidence for them. And getting over that one, of seeing the evidence that supports the thought you first had, which is terribly, terribly important. Now, the general message of all of this is that, you know, we are, oh, I hate things that end with the conclusion that it is all very complicated. So I'm going to amend that. The conclusion is that we are all very complicated. But the most important thing, I think, that comes out of all of this, and all this interesting psycho work that's been done, the most important thing is that you shouldn't become trapped by your own mindset. And you should occasionally look for these opportunities where, if you twist the logic 180 degrees rather than 20 or 30 degrees, do you come up with something that actually tells you something interesting. So that is my conclusion, ladies and gentlemen. And on top of that, I guess it's go forth and do good, Thank you very much.